Welcome to Let's Talk About It Sunday, an extension of KELA's weekday local talk show featuring a variety of subjects of local interest. This program was pre-recorded, so we're unable to take live calls on today's show. And now, let's talk about it.
Welcome to the Let's Talk About It show here on AM1470 KELA and KMNT. You could also stream the show at KELAAM.com and KMNT.com. Today I have a really special guest because there's a lot of talk around hydrogen, clean energy fuels. You can read articles almost daily in a newspaper here in the state of Washington about the transition from fossil fuels to more clean energy. And one aspect that has become really a lightning rod in Lewis County, especially because of the transition from TransAlta, is the applicability of things like hydrogen and green hydrogen. So on the Let's Talk About It Sunday show, I have Dave Warren. Dave Warren is with the Washington State Green Hydrogen Alliance, and he's advocating for hydrogen. And he's going to talk a little bit about all the things that are hydrogen, the applications of hydrogen. And one of the things that I always get when I talk hydrogen, which I think is kind of funny, is people will talk about the Hindenburg. People will talk about all these explosions, and Dave is going to address some of those misnomers about hydrogen. So with us today on the Let's Talk About It Sunday show, Dave Warren. Dave, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Peter. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So, Dave, let's talk about first, what is the Washington Green Hydrogen Alliance?
So it's a trade association, and I'm a co-founder. We founded WGHA about a year and a half ago now, almost 2 years ago, to support and advocate for policies and projects in Washington State to promote the use of what we'll call green hydrogen, although the colors are a little misleading in many ways. But we talk about hydrogen, and we can get into a little bit of how it's produced, but produced from renewable energy and from electricity. So we've defined that in the state as renewable hydrogen and green electrolytic hydrogen.
So what is hydrogen? I mean, a lot of folks think hydrogen, they think either the Hindenburg or they think of hydro as in water, which it kind of is in a sense. So to discuss what is hydrogen and green hydrogen, and maybe you could even talk about some of the different colors you're referencing, because that gets confusing too.
Yes, it does. So the first thing when you mention hydrogen, as you point out, is what about the Hindenburg? And there's a lot of, still to this day, a lot of differing perspectives on what caused the Hindenburg. But hydrogen in that case hydrogen is the most prevalent material in the universe. It's the first chemical on the periodic table, and in the Hindenburg, it was to fill up the balloon, the blimp. And if you look at the pictures, because there is still a visual, you'll see that there was a lot of flame, but hydrogen burns clean and there was color to that flame. So many people have relied on that to say it might not have been the hydrogen itself that was causing all of the flame. But hydrogen has been used as an industrial gas in this country and around the world for 40, 50, 60 years. Right now, we can think of the best way to think about it is hydrogen is an energy carrier, I think is the best way to think about it. And right now we produce almost all of the hydrogen used in this country and in the world from methane, natural gas, which its chemical composition is CH4, carbon, one carbon atom, and 4 hydrogen. And you use energy then to split that atom. And when it's made from methane, it emits carbon dioxide, the carbon split off, and paired with oxygen. And then the hydrogen takes the energy from the methane and you put that energy into hydrogen. So the best way to think about hydrogen, I think, is an energy carrier, not necessarily like oil and gas that's a primary fuel or coal. You can make hydrogen and take the energy from those molecules and put it into the hydrogen and then transport it in a gaseous form or liquid form to then use the hydrogen to recover that energy, either by burning it or by chemically recombining it. In both cases, it's recombined with an oxygen molecule, and water is the byproduct, interestingly enough. So I think of it as similar to lithium as we talk about electrifying many of our energy uses to reduce the emissions of carbon. And the way to think about it is it's a battery. That's how I think about it. We stuff it with energy. Um, what we're looking at now in the state is rather than producing that hydrogen from methane, where right now it's used for fertilizer manufacturing and petroleum refining. We're now looking at it for multiple uses, and we're doing it primarily with taking water and electricity and taking the electricity, uh, energizing the water, in essence, splitting the hydrogen and the oxygen in a water molecule, storing that electrical energy in hydrogen, and then either as a gas or liquid, you can put it in a tanker truck and drive it to a hydrogen fueling station. You can put it in what's called a fuel cell, which is where the fuel cell takes the hydrogen, recombines it with oxygen, it generates electricity, and puts out water and heat. And so, yeah, it's pretty fascinating, and it's been called a Swiss Army knife of decarbonization.
Yeah, I mean, it really is very interesting. If you're just tuning into the Let's Talk About It show on AM 1470 KELA or 104.3 KMNT, my special guest today, Dave Warren with the Washington Green Hydrogen Alliance. So Dave, and if you want to follow along, you can go to wagreenhydrogen.com. That's the website. You can go to the website and follow along a little bit. There's some really good information about what green hydrogen energy is and how it's produced. And make sure you obviously stay tuned here while Dave and I talk, because we're going to really get into this. Because again, so we've dispelled this idea that it's anything like the Hindenburg. It's very different. One question I get a lot on hydrogen is whether or not it's safe or not. And there's been a lot of information that I've read online, Dave, and maybe you can talk about this, is that actually in transportation, for instance, that hydrogen could actually be more safe than things like fuel cells, especially when things catch on fire.
Yeah, let's think of the three types of automobiles or vehicles that we're going to have in the future: a gasoline fueled or petroleum based, a lithium battery electric vehicle, or a hydrogen powered fuel cell electric vehicle. Right. So hydrogen, first, it's not toxic, unlike gasoline or diesel. You can breathe in benzene and those sorts of things. So a hydrogen leak or spill will not contaminate the environment or threaten the health of humans or wildlife. And it's 14 times lighter than air and 57 times lighter than gasoline. So if the fuel tank is punctured, for instance, hydrogen will dissipate up into the air. And it will burn while it's dissipating, but it will burn up, it will dissipate into the air, whereas gasoline will pool, for instance, at the bottom of the vehicle in a vehicle fire and burn. That's why you see gasoline or car fires with gasoline just enveloping the cars. And with lithium, if a lithium battery catches on fire, you've probably heard and seen that you literally can't put it out until it burns out. I think there was a car fire somewhere in the state, maybe in the Northwest, that took the firefighters an hour and a half of dousing the lithium. And so it's also got a lower radiant heat than conventional gasoline. This is what was fascinating to me, meaning the air around the flame of hydrogen is not as hot as around a gasoline flame. Therefore, there's less risk of the fire catching on to other material around there. And then finally, hydrogen has a higher oxygen requirement for explosion than fossil fuels. So it needs more oxygen. So something like 18 to 59% of the air around needs to be oxygen for hydrogen to explode, whereas gasoline is explosive at oxygen concentrations of 1 to 3%. So it's much safer all the way around than gasoline, and probably lithium. When lithium burns, it emits toxic fumes as well. So, and again, we've been using hydrogen as an industrial gas for 40, 50, 60 years. So There's all sorts of safety protocols around how you produce it, how you transport it, how you store it, those sorts of things. So,
Well, and Dave, I think that's a really interesting point and a good point, because there are some who think hydrogen is this brand new energy source. However, the country and even the state has been producing and using hydrogen for many years now.
yes, since we've been refining petroleum fuel for gasoline, and as I said, we make fertilizer with it. So, yeah, we've been using it for many, many, many years.
And using it, but created in different ways. I mean, we're talking about green hydrogen, but there's an array. I think you referenced it earlier. There's an array of colors: gray hydrogen, blue hydrogen. I don't know, purple hydrogen.
Yeah.
There's many different, and it's based on right. I mean, they're color coded based on how hydrogen's created. Is that correct?
Yes, and its source, we think of it as where does the hydrogen molecule come from, right? So it can come from coal, it can come from natural gas, it can come from the trees in the forest, or biomass.
Mm-hmm.
It's in water, right? So the idea is where do you get your hydrogen molecule from? And then where do you get the energy that you're putting into the hydrogen molecule that it then carries around, just like a battery, right?
Yeah.
And so let's see, I think if I get it right, gray hydrogen is made from methane and the CO2 is emitted into the air, which is how we make it now. It's called steam methane reformation. Blue hydrogen is still using methane as the source of the hydrogen molecule, but the carbon is captured and sequestered. Green hydrogen is made with 100% renewable electricity and water. Water is the source of the molecule. That's a bit of a misnomer, I think, because in the Pacific Northwest we have huge amounts of renewable energy, right, from our hydro system and a lot of wind. We also have a nuclear power plant. We have some little bit of coal left and gas fired, but we're on a decarbonization pathway for our electricity. So to me, the electricity that goes into the hydrogen molecule should be treated the same way as that goes into a lithium molecule, right? They're batteries.
Right.
Then there's pink, which I think is made with 100% nuclear power. I think brown comes from coal. You know, there's various colors, but the way I think about it is, does the molecule come from a fossil fuel, or does it come from a non-fossil fuel? So non-fossil fuel would be biomass, water, renewable natural gas, that sort of thing. That's
So,
how I think the categories are more accurate.
so like in Washington, for instance, I mean, we talk about green hydrogen. It may not be 100% renewable, since, for instance, Bonneville may be 97%. So
Right.
you buy the energy, even though it's not 100%, you buy, would you buy carbon credits for that extra 3% to offset it to make it green hydrogen? Is that how that would work?
Well, in state law, we've defined it as green electrolytic hydrogen, and that's exactly the same as it's defined in California,
Mm-hmm.
but that doesn't require it to be 100% renewable energy. Both California, Oregon, and Washington, our electricity is on a decarbonization pathway by 2030 and by 2045.
Mm-hmm.
And plus, we have the nuclear power plant in our mix, and in our state law, we've allowed that and encouraged that as a non-emitting resource. Right? It doesn't emit CO2. So that's what right now we don't even in our definitions in law do not have to offset that 2 or 3 or 4% from the Bonneville Power Administration with the renewable energy credits. Our electricity is on its way to decarbonization. Legislatures acknowledge that, and that's how our policies are defined.
Yeah, it's super interesting and complex. If you're just tuning in to Let's Talk About It Sunday with me, your host, Peter Abbarno, my special guest today is Dave Warren with the Washington Green Hydrogen Alliance. We're talking about, well, it's in the title alone, green hydrogen. So make sure you stay tuned. This is a really good show. A lot of good information on the show. Dave, one of the interesting things that we've talked about locally, especially here in Lewis County, is, and you mentioned it earlier, coal. It's TransAlta, and it's the transition away from coal and TransAlta. And there's a lot of really interesting opportunity for hydrogen locally, not only at that site, but as you know, and you were part of, the building of the soon-to-be building of, or at least the funding for the building of, what we hope to be the first hydrogen refueling station right here in Chehalis. A lot of interesting hydrogen advancements. There's some going on in Moses Lake. There's some going on up in Bellingham. Can you talk about some of these really exciting advancements we're seeing in hydrogen in Washington?
Yeah, that's particularly exciting, I think. Several years ago, a couple of us approached the Centralia Coal Transition Board to they have some funds, they're funding clean energy projects to fund the state's first hydrogen fueling station, located there in Chehalis, about halfway between Portland and Seattle, as I don't need to tell your audience, along I-5. And it's pretty exciting as we transition to our zero emission transportation vehicles. Most people think of a battery electric vehicle, but a fuel cell, a hydrogen powered fuel cell, would generate electricity in a car and run that same electric motor. So in California, you see there are 6 or 7 or 8,000 fuel cell electric vehicles on the order of 50 or 60 hydrogen fueling stations. And British Columbia is building out hydrogen fueling stations. So the first one in the state was funded, and the legislature added some funding to that. And that will be, I think it's on exit 78. And it'll be publicly available, hopefully in the next year or two, about the same time that auto dealers are supposed to be offering more and more zero emission vehicles. So we're excited about getting fuel cell electric vehicles, and that can run from light duty. Toyota makes similar to a Corolla. It's called a Mirai. It's a beautiful car. Honda makes a fuel cell electric vehicle. BMW just announced they think about 30% of their zero emission vehicles will need to be hydrogen fuel cell powered, along with lithium batteries. And Tacoma Rail is experimenting with a hydrogen powered locomotive, and we have several companies doing experimental tests with hydrogen powered airplanes. There's a company called 12 building the first sustainable aviation fuel production facility near Moses Lake using clean hydrogen. And so there's just a lot of excitement. PACCAR up in Renton, which owns Kenworth and Peterbilt, big rigs, I think, has built 10 fuel cell powered big rigs to ship. And they're already down at the ports of Long Beach and Los Angeles in California, running around the port, what's called drayage vehicles. So a lot of exciting movement. We also had the country's first hydrogen powered ferry built in Bellingham, which is operating in San Francisco now. So across the board for transportation of all sectors, it's a complement to a lithium battery. We think of hydrogen and a fuel cell combination as a battery that'll power aviation. Part of its beauty, Peter, is it is more energy dense per weight than lithium. It will carry more energy than lithium for the same amount of weight. So especially as your vehicles get bigger, you need a bigger battery to power bigger vehicles. And when you get a bigger battery, you need more battery to power the bigger battery, right?
Yeah.
So hydrogen has multiple uses because you can get more energy for less weight on your vehicle, and that's any size vehicle. So pretty exciting.
Yeah, I mean, there's just a lot of exciting. You know, you have at TransAlta, Fortescue, and First Mode, and others.
Yep.
And you and I have had these conversations, off air before about what are you going to do in the shipping industry, in the trucking industry, because, and even buses, even school buses, because there's a lot of movement that even school buses are going to have to be electric. Well, a school bus traveling to White Pass is not going to really make it. It's not. I mean, there's a lot of limitations to these fuel cells because of the weight and size, where hydrogen can step in, not just for heavy duty transportation, but also light, because you're seeing it in.
Yeah.
You and I've talked. California is going to have 200 hydrogen refueling stations, and their goal is to have 100,000 vehicles, and then you have the hydrogen highway up in British Columbia, and so Washington is a a player in the hydrogen world and applied for the to become one of the hydrogen hubs. And I know you were part of that as well.
Yeah, and one of the beauties of hydrogen for vehicles is it will refuel a passenger vehicle in the same 3 to 5 minutes that it would take you to refill your gasoline powered engine, right? You don't have to sit there for half an hour, 2 hours to recharge your battery. It will fuel within that 3 to 5 minutes for passenger vehicle, and the same for a big rig, about an equivalent of what it takes to fill with diesel. And because it can pack more energy for the same weight, you get longer routes, right? And in cold weather, because the fuel cell, when it uses hydrogen to generate electricity, emits heat as a byproduct. So if you need to turn your heater on, you're not drawing your battery down. You're pulling it off exhaust heat, just like a gasoline motor. So for longer distances, colder climates, quicker refueling times, for transit, for big rigs, for even passenger vehicles, pickup trucks, construction work trucks that have to draw that power all day long, utility trucks. Hydrogen is a much better application for those reasons as well. So it's got a place alongside lithium batteries. It's not an either or. It is a combination of both. They both have their strengths that we need to apply as we transition to zero emission transportation.
You are listening to Let's Talk About It Sunday, an extension of KELA's weekday local talk show. Stay tuned. Let's Talk About It Sunday edition will return in a moment.
Okay, and now back to business.
Listen on the air and online.
KELA.
Let's talk about it. Good morning. You're listening to Let's Talk About It Sunday, an extension of KELA's weekday local talk show. This program was pre-recorded, so no live phone calls on today's show.
If you're just tuning in to Let's Talk About It Sunday with me, your host, Peter Abbarno, my special guest today, Dave Warren with the Washington Green Hydrogen Alliance, talking hydrogen, talking the applications. Dave, what's your response? Because I get this a lot, that there's no difference between charging your lithium battery car versus using all this electricity to electrolyze for hydrogen.
Yeah, that's a fascinating debate, I guess. A lot of people have concluded that because lithium, when you put the electricity out the battery into lithium and you get about 80% of it out, and their argument is that when you electrolyze water to get the hydrogen, you lose some efficiency there, and then when the hydrogen goes into the fuel cell and then converts it to electricity, you lose some efficiency there. But I think what the battery charging people don't take into account, because I think the assumption is about 80% of all of our charging of our battery vehicles will be in our home garage. Well, you lose 10 to 12% of your electricity from your outlet into the battery to run the fan to keep the battery from overheating and to convert alternating current to direct current. You lose some in the transformer that's at your house as you step down and transform, and you lose what's called line losses. Hydrogen is made further upstream. So when you see like a Fortescue or that's looking at producing large amounts of hydrogen, think of it as a refinery, right? But that hydrogen can then be transported to a gas station. As we build more and more renewables to get that electricity into your outlet when you plug your car in, we're also going to have multiple storage, probably more lithium, but hydrogen is an energy storage as well, to get the electricity from the time when the wind's blowing or the sun's shining to the time you want it coming into the outlet in your garage or in your house. So looking at it from a grid scale, hydrogen can be made further upstream and then transported as a gas or liquid in tanker trucks, just like gasoline is now, to the fueling stations. So you don't need the electricity being generated at the time you fill your tank. So that's another value of hydrogen as a complement to lithium and how we use our electricity, because we are going to have more and more demands on our grid, and we are adding more generation to our grid that is what we call intermittent, which is wind and solar, right? And we can predict over a day when the sun, how much solar might be generated, but it's only during the middle of the day. And we can predict over a year about how much a wind is going to blow, but we can't predict it day to day out in the future. So both for grid resilience and the variety, the applications between hydrogen and lithium, we're going to need both.
Right.
As we electrify our transportation, and ultimately a lot of people want to electrify our buildings as well.
Well, and again, I think it's important to have a diverse energy portfolio in the state of Washington and our country. I mean, it's important to have multiple dimensional for energy. And, to be a little selfish too, I also don't want to drive somewhere, sit for 20 minutes to charge my vehicle or 30 minutes to charge my vehicle, or increase my drive to Spokane by, 45 minutes to an hour. I would rather spend 3 to 5 minutes, just like I do with a gasoline vehicle, fill it up and be on my way.
Yes.
And
that's, go ahead.
I was just going to say, and I think the more people to realize how inconvenienced they're going to be from electric versus for hydrogen are going to then choose hydrogen.
That's exactly right. If you've got long drives, long distances, which we do, most people who live in the rural areas of the state have to drive longer to the grocery store, to the mailbox, or to work. And we're across the state, and you don't have that downtime to recharge. And if it's a work truck or something like that, or in cold weather, or you're going up over the passes, you need that extra power, and you don't need the other value there is you don't need the additional electrical infrastructure, which is going to be very expensive. Truck stops, you start looking at the numbers of a truck stop to put an electric grid to charge big rigs, at a Love's or a Pilot, would be the equivalent of a small city to build the grid, the substations and the transformers, and to bring all of that power in at the time those trucks plug in. So hydrogen won't need that. You'll have a fueling station. You have a little bit of electricity similar to what you have at the gas station. But you avoid those multi-million-dollar upgrades that are required to bring that much electricity into one location.
Well, Dave, we're running out of time. I want to thank you for joining us on Let's Talk About It Sunday and sharing everything that the Washington Green Hydrogen Alliance is doing. Appreciate you being on the show.
Thank you, Peter. Appreciate you having me.
Yep, that was Dave Warren with the Washington Green Hydrogen Alliance. And if you want to learn more about the Washington Green Hydrogen Alliance, go to wagreenhydrogen.com. Check out their website. A lot of great things going on. And thank you again for tuning in to Let's Talk About It Sunday.